A very good morning and thank you so much for having joined the webinar today. My name is Jay. I am with the Identity Access Management and IT Security team here at ManageEngine. So it's always a wonderful sight to have you guys over for our ManageEngine webinars. And this specific webinar is the 23rd webinar that we are organizing since the beginning of the year. So what is the purpose behind the webinars that we are doing? So ManageEngine does quite a lot of research around IT security and identity access management, and I'm sure most of you are aware we've got offerings for those as well. So the idea is to get you guys to speed, to understand what are the major challenges administrators are facing and help you tackle. That is very much the idea of every webinar. Once again, a huge welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time out. So today's session is going to be for Active Directory auditing, and we'll be talking about one crucial topic. I'm planning to keep the webinar action oriented. We will be doing at best 40 minutes of a session. We'll go forward, understand tips and tricks to diagnose account lockouts. So before we get started, I would want to ensure that you guys are able to hear me absolutely fine. I'm pretty sure you guys have your notepad and also have a cup of coffee because we have an interesting session planned. I do not want any of you to miss out on any important aspect that's being discussed. So I'm going to start with a quick audio video check, and you early birds are going to help me do the audio video check. So if you can hear me speak, alright, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and I would want you to write 1, 2, 3 on chat and send me a message. 1, 2, 3. Oh lovely, thank you Jay, Andrew, Steve, Henry, Joshua and Pierre. It seems to be perfectly working fine, thank you. The audio seems to be working fine. Now let's do a quick check on the video. The video says, or the screen right now says, tips and tricks to diagnose account lockouts. The screen says tips and tricks to diagnose account lockouts. If you can see the screen, say okay or great. Lovely, thank you so much for the confirmation. Perfect, it sounds good, the audio is good, the video is good. So let's get started. So the idea behind today's session is to essentially help you understand how account lockouts can be of great importance in organization when it comes to managing identities and ensuring business continuity. Many a times as administrators, we would have had that instance where some critical account or some key stakeholder in the organization gets locked out and there's a lot of ruckus around that. So today's session is essentially going to give you an alternate perspective. Account lockouts aren't just a management mishap. Account lockouts could very well be a security problem as well. So we'll be talking about what is the impact of an account lockout on your organization's productivity, business, IT security and so on. We'll be talking about that. We'll further go on to understand what could be the major causes of account lockout, because as administrators we want to know things to the very last detail. I'm pretty sure that's how you are. That being the case, at times it does help to know more than our peers. When we're talking about account lockouts, there are certain general scenarios like users forgetting their passwords, doing a bad logon, the accounts get locked out. Probably there could be another scenario where there are stale passwords that are being used by services. That could be another scenario. But then there could be other security oriented scenarios where someone's trying to brute force you, where someone just wants to initiate a denial of service. And there could be many such instances where user identities, security gets compromised, the accounts get locked out, and most importantly, these hackers have trained themselves to not get detected by systems. So we'll be understanding an hacker's mindset as well going through the session. So I will be giving you straightforward tips and tricks. I will be helping you understand the impact of account lockout on businesses. We'll also go on to understand why is it such a hard thing to figure out what's going on with account lockouts with our existing tools. So I'm pretty sure you as an administrator would have worked a lot with Active Directory auditing, and I'm also sure that you aren't a big fan of the event viewer. So if someone were to really make use of the event viewer to figure out what was the root cause for an account lockout, most of the time they end up not achieving their ultimate goal. It turns out to be super complex. because the number of logs that get generated every second, the number of events that are going on, it is as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. So we would want a solution that can very clearly pinpoint us to what's the exact problem and how do we go about fixing it. And through the course, we will also understand as to what are the common causes, and this knowledge can essentially help us handle account lockouts very differently. So what if you can take a proactive approach to account lockouts? What if you can have a system that foolproofs your users from locking themselves out? So that is very much the agenda of the session. We'll also take a security angle, which brings us to this slide. So what do we see right here? We see an organization where the employees seem to be absolutely happy. An administrator or a technician would also seem to be very happy if the operations of IT are smooth. They look like this. But then, much to our surprise or much to our concern, we've had surveys going on in the last 1 year. We've been interacting with a lot of administrators through the last few years, and we've realized that it is good to start changing your perspective towards IT security. Why would I say this? All along, we wanted to do IT security reactively. When something goes wrong, you want to step in and then correct it. But then what if we could change our approach and assume that something is already wrong? Let's start assuming that an attacker is already in your system. Why would I say this? Because we've had disturbing information in the past. We've had terrible attacks where attackers crept into the system a few months back, have been waiting for the right time. They've been studying your users. What seemed to be a perfectly normal organization could end up being an organization whose security is already compromised. So my suggestion to you would be, assume that you are already under attack. Have systems in place that can cater to that specific case that I'm talking about. So here, attackers somehow get access into any of your systems and then they go forward. You would have noticed a couple of lockouts happening here and there, but then it seemed perfectly alright because the user or the employee did not raise a red flag. It was a lockout. The user was, say, out of office, it was a lockout, they get back and you unlock the account, it seems perfectly fine. But how would you know if the lockout was due to valid reasons, was due to a legit reason? It could very well be because an attacker tried to access the account, failed a couple of times and successfully got access. So there could be multiple scenarios, and in fact, it is all the more striking, and it came to us as a total shock when we saw this infographic that Microsoft put out a while back. Last year when I had been to the conference that Microsoft organizes, it's called the Ignite. I'm pretty sure you guys are aware. The Ignite conference, where they give away or they share information around the security aspects of Microsoft products. They tell you what is their roadmap and how they are working. They in fact came out to be honest and told us that they've had these issues. We've had instances where attackers creep into your system. It's really scary, and they stay in your system for quite a long time without being recognized. All that an attacker needs is just one touch point or one access to get into your system, and under less than 2 days time, an attacker can very much compromise the entire security of your organization without you being able to track that. Why is that? An attacker turns out to be quite intelligent. They try to engineer a scenario in such a way that they slowly start exfiltrating data over months together. By the time they leave your organization with all the data you want, you would not even have known. So we would need systems that are proactive, that are foolproof. And in fact, account lockout turns out to be one such measure Microsoft had in place essentially to curtail attackers, but it did not prove to be foolproof. We've had instances where there have been records of 68% of these breaches that took more than a month to discover. What are you going to do? So you would essentially know that someone is in your system only after a month. And that is exactly why I would want you to assume that you are already being attacked. and change the way your IT security operates to align to this specific orientation that I'm talking about. So we'll start off by understanding the impact of an account lockout. We'll see what damage could account lockout cause to your organization. Essentially speaking, it could impact your organizations at multiple levels, not just hindering productivity, but also for your users, it's going to create a lot of trouble. From an administrator standpoint, you would be required to spend hours together to, not just unlock an account. If it's just unlocking an account, it would probably take 5 minutes at best. But then, does it really stop right there? You would need to ensure that the same user does not keep getting locked out. You would want to drill down a little further to understand what was the reason behind the lockout. Was it a legitimate reason? Was it a legitimate lockout, or was it something malicious? So you would essentially spend about an hour or two understanding what went on in the background for the account to be locked out. So that takes up tremendous load on an administrator, not just to unlock an account, but also to study what went behind and does it really stop right there? It all is essentially because of one basic problem, is it not? One basic problem that causes an impact on your entire IT infrastructure. We are talking about that one basic problem, which is passwords being expired. Why would our users not change their passwords when it's time? Our users are like that. You try to have the best in class security. You have the best SIAM solution out there guarding or safeguarding your network, but then you still have users who write their passwords on a piece of paper or a sticky note and have it stuck right on top of their desktops. What are we going to do about those users? It essentially boils down to that point where the security of your organization is only as strong as the weakest link. Irrespective of how hard you try, irrespective of what best practices you follow, always it ends up being a problem because of one user who was careless. So how do we go forward educating them or simplifying the whole process for them, just to ensure that their passwords don't expire, and how do we tackle this problem right from its source? So we'll be talking about that as well. And another major impact is, at times there could be a false positive. You would think it's a false positive, but then the attacker's already crept in, and at times administrators oversee or lose track of what had happened to a specific account. They do not go back, check the logon records. It's time consuming. Why would you want to manually do it? And given the fact that the event viewer isn't really a friendly console, we are under this major fix. How do we go forward? How do we go forward is the big question. So for us to go forward and understand how to tackle it best, it would help if we know what are the common causes. Because knowing what could be a potential reason very much changes the way how you address this situation. So it could be basically due to two major problems. One, it could either be due to a common cause like a forgetful user. The user just forgot their password. Or it could be due to a security issue. An attacker trying to get access into your system. The most basic form of attack is a brute force attack. Right? And the idea behind having an account lockout in the first place is to prevent users from brute forcing. But what if the attackers can move laterally? But what if the attacker does not operate or attack one account at one time, but tries to attack multiple accounts with one password, just so that they go way beyond or way below the radar? We're talking about a password spray attack. So attackers these days are quite intelligent. They're very savvy. They're backed up by crazy bots that can essentially trigger attacks and also totally go under the radar. Artificial intelligence is not just helping organizations, but also attackers. So they're taking such tools in their hands and trying to initiate an attack. How can your system intelligently analyze user behavior? So our system should have a provision to know or differentiate between what's normal user behavior and what's abnormal user behavior. We'll be talking about that. Going forward, we'll also be discussing about a little on account lockouts pertaining to stale passwords. How do stale passwords play a very bad role, or how do they cause trouble? What about programs and tasks that are scheduled? What about those specific tasks that essentially power your system? Right, we'll be talking about that. So going forward, it is important that the productivity loss is essentially associated with us not being able to remediate the problem right away. If it was a service account, all right, one of the service accounts using one of the credentials in one of the applications, how are you going to drill down to the point as to see what exactly was that specific reason behind that account being locked out? So we would need programs, we would need tools that tell you straightforward. There could be instances where a service account password got changed and never got updated in your service control manager. How are we going to address that? So we'll be talking about that as well. And yes, irrespective of how effectively you set the password threshold, there are going to be chances that you have false positives. So through and through, we've got quite a lot of cases that essentially cause trouble to us. So we will need to go back to understand what are the common causes. We will need to go back to understand what and why does your AD tools fall short. So I've given you the causes. I've given you a quick overview on why native AD tools fall short. I'm going to quickly get into a live demonstration as to how difficult it is to skim through your event viewer. All right. So just a quick second while I get my event viewer up. Alright, so what do I have right here? I have my event viewer. This is the only tool that I have to understand if an account gets locked out. So I look up for 4740 as the event ID. Is that going to be enough? Is it going to be giving me information around what went wrong or what was the reason? How do I have a clear-cut demarcation between a legitimate attack or a legitimate lockout and an attack? So we would need to be talking about that as well. So going forward, let me quickly show you one more thing. So we would need a tool, all right, a tool that can give you access to reports, a tool that can give you access to clear-cut information on what was the cause, what was the effect, and that is exactly what I'm going to show you in a bit. Just a quick second. So we just understood why is it difficult to find out lockouts. We will quickly get into AD Audit Plus, the tool at hand. I'm going to give you the link to access the tool right now. All right, so you can try out the tool as I talk. So the tool will help you understand and identify major account lockout reasons. I'm going to quickly drop that to you on chat right now, and there you go. So this specific instance is going to help you. You can walk yourself through as I demonstrate how to find out account lockouts. So we've got AD Audit Plus right here, a comprehensive auditing tool that does account lockout analysis. So I'm going to quickly open up account lockout. So we've been talking about troubles with account lockout. The problem is to find out what was the source of the problem. So I get to account lockout analyzer right here, and this is going to give me an instant image or a real-time picture into which accounts in my organizations get locked out the most. Where did the lockout initiate? I've got all the records of the users right here. What was the event that triggered the lockout? When did the user lock out? So if you want to just unlock users, our tool is also going to help you. The AD Manager component will help you unlock user accounts. That you could very much do, but we would want to know what was the major reason. So let me quickly get into one of these logs and show you how detailed it is. It tells you aspects pertaining to an user's touch point. So the challenge, like I earlier pointed out, is essentially to find out that one application that did not have the right credentials. It could be an application whose credentials are stale, or it could be an application that's using a cached credential and creating all the ruckus, or in fact it could be something as simple as an AD password that did not get replicated across domain controllers right when it had to. So you could have accounts being used in multiple touch points. The challenge is to pinpoint where was the problem. So you have a real-time overview on an account that got locked out, and all possible places where the account could log in or authenticate itself. We've got Windows services, we've got scheduled tasks, we've got network drive mappings, logon sessions, we've got the list of processes that use these credentials and applications as well. So I can drill down further and show you what are the applications that are using these logs. So we see a few successful logs. We would want to get into the recent logon activity and understand why was a account locked. So we have a series of reasons. We have bad passwords, we have account was disabled and expired and then got locked out. We would be able to find out whether it was due to an OWA or an active sync issue. So when I get here, you would be able to see that if a user's accessing their Exchange server or accessing their Exchange mailbox from outside, the log is going to say the problem arrived from your Exchange server. It is necessarily not going to pinpoint back to the user, and you would never know what went wrong. So all of that we're talking about is under one console. I would essentially know what are the services that the user has access to and which is that one specific application that had a stale password or a bad password and resulted in the account being locked out. So here I would immediately be able to remediate number one. If it's just a user, it's still okay. You can get them back on track. If it's a critical user, that's a problem of greater magnitude. But what if it's a service account that is linked to critical applications in your organization? So you're going to take down an entire set of users, and you're going to also be not able to quickly recover, because let's say a critical service account that has gone down for probably 30 minutes. How are you going to remediate the damage that it caused? So it essentially helps when you know the entire history. So you would get access to the history right here, what had happened before the account got locked out, so that you can analyze, so that you can very much make a mental map saying whether it was a legitimate logon failure or was it one that was triggered by an attacker. So such analysis will help you understand and unlock accounts better. So that is what we intend to do. So I'm going to quickly show you a couple of more things. We would want to take a proactive approach, is what we've been talking about all along, right? So we understood that the native tools fall short. They do not help you relate information and tell you a cumulative result. They just say something went wrong. And this instance of something gone wrong would have been a culmination of quite a lot of other different happenings. So how do you put things to perspective is the challenge. Your native tools aren't really going to help you get to that point where you can diagnose what is going wrong. So that's exactly where AD Audit Plus steps in. So you would be able to very much diagnose the reason behind an account lockout and correlate multiple activities. It could be an activity like a logon failure. You would be able to demarcate whether was it a brute force attack or was it a user who just forgot their password. You would at the same time be able to look into multiple components, be it multiple Windows components, and if there's a stale password, you'd be able to fix it. The most important thing again is to be notified on time, because when it comes to account lockouts, the most important thing is the service level agreement, or the speed at which do you resolve the issue makes a lot of sense. You would not want downtime for a critical user or a critical account. So how do you get instantly notified when a privileged account is locked out? How would you get instantly notified when there are high volumes of logon failure? So you could set alerts in the tool. The tool is dynamic in that aspect. I'm going to quickly show you how to go on and configure an alert. I get to the alerts module. The problem at hand is to be able to set an alert for privileged users whose accounts are being locked out. So I cannot entertain privileged accounts being locked out. So I create an alert that works based on thresholds. So I get to my alerting module. I create a new alert. Let's say anomalous lockout privileged user. So this is just one case. There could be multiple cases. So the criticality of the instance is marked right here. It's severe, and then I go forward and pick and choose from a report that is a part of AD Audit Plus. So this is the beauty. Both the alerting and the reporting work hand in hand, and a management aspect of action can also be triggered right after you understand that it's a malicious logon. So I'm going to quickly choose that one specific profile right here, which is being able to find out the log on log off. I get to log on log off. So here I would want to pick and choose one filter. we are trying to understand if there were any failed logons and if they were repetitive. So I'm going to pick the local logon failure for computers. So this is one of the filters that I want to pick. The next one is a filter for privileged user accounts. I go on and talk about locked out users. So I have two filters right here, one for repetitive logon failures and one for locked out users. So I want an alert when there are repetitive logon failures followed by a lockout, and I would want to not just stop right there, get to my advanced configuration and start setting logic to the analysis. So I would want a threshold right here in place that says if 10 logon failures happen in under 1 minute, then pinpoint me to that specific user account, give me details of every event that's being caused by that user account and on that specific machine, and all of those details can I call in when I need. All right, so I could do that. The next one is you would also want to keep track of whether the event is happening on a non-business hour, in non-business hours. So this is all the more important because it's critical when a user who always keeps logging in during the day or during the business hours all of a sudden logs in during non-business hours. So this helps because most of the attackers, their favorite time is when nobody is around. So non-business hours is an easy filter for you to catch. Likewise, you can add more filters right here. I'll show you how or what all could you be doing. So I'm going to say which specific users. So since I want just my privileged users to be a part of this notification, I can pick and choose those users who need to be monitored, those users whose accounts I want to be tracking continuously 24/7 and receive an alert. So I can do an OU based filtering or a group based filtering. So if you want to keep track of all the users who are under the administrator group, you can say okay. Or if you want to go to an OU and pick and choose all those users from a specific OU, let's say critical group to your organization is this. So all those users who can manage the Windows server are a part of this OU. So you would want to select that. So likewise, you can say and set the criticality based on the types of users, be it a classification based on group or a classification based on OU, and you say okay. So what are we doing right here is creating a simple logic. You can create as many alerts as you want. I'm just taking one example where I'm trying to find out anomalous lockouts for privileged users. All right. Quite bad with spelling, sorry about that. So anomalous lockout of privileged users, we're talking about cases where repetitive logon failures are followed by one lockout for a select set of users who are a part of the administrative group. The lockout is happening in a non-business hour and the threshold is 10 login failures in 1 minute. So a normal user cannot trigger 10 login failures under 1 minute. Unless they are Superman, they cannot type that fast and lock themselves out like that. So we've got a very legitimate scenario right here which will let me be notified right when the event occurs. So I can notify an administrator, a user, or the manager of the user. I can have very detailed subjects and very detailed bodies that say what went wrong. I could have an instant case analysis report sent out to me so that I can quickly get to it and fix it. I would even be okay if I have an SMS notification. So these are critical tasks. I don't keep checking my email all the time, but I check my texts all the time. I can send out a notification. And the most important functionality is for you to able to remediate. The moment you realize that there was a logon failure, multiple logon failures, the threshold broke, you would want to quickly execute a script before the user could do anything else and lock them out or disable them, or in fact, even there are provisions to shut that specific endpoint out. You can do such things with a remote script execution right when the threshold is met. So we are talking about being able to not just diagnose but also be proactive in our approach, instantly remediate if there is a problem. So we would be very happy if we had such provisions, so which is account lockout analysis followed by an instant notification. The next one is again added advantage if you know or pick the general trend of account lockout. So you could very much know who are the users who keep frequently locking themselves out. So you would not want an unnecessary false positive, right? So I can very much go to my reports. I have a report for users who frequently lock themselves out. I can drill down deep and find out what was the reason. Was it a bad password? Was it bad memory? Or are they simply locking themselves out? Or was it a service that had a bad password and kept locking them out? So here you go. I could very much look for a frequently locked out users report. So I have the list of users who are locking themselves out all the time. So I have a top locked out users, nothing to be proud of, but then they are the top locked out users. We've got users, all of them here, and I can in fact do frequently locked out users, a report that will give me more clarity and how are they getting locked out. So I select just one user and I'll be able to drill down into every event or every action that the user had performed before the lockout. I have the logon history right here. I have the entire story of that user and what went wrong. This helps. This very much helps. In fact, what I'd recommend is you get to AD Audit Plus, create a dashboard view for the same. So I would want a quick overview on all those top lockout users in the last 30 days. So is there a deviation in this trend? All of a sudden, if multiple user accounts are locking out, so you know that something's wrong. You would get a critical alert right away when something really happens. So we would want you to use the tool to the fullest, use it for analytics, and in fact it doesn't stop right there. We've put together an analytics module, a user behavior analytics that's powered by a machine learning algorithm that can help you find out anomalous user activity. So is there an unusual activity right there? Is there an unusual logon failure based on the user? So multiple parameters get taken into account. I can find out if there was an unusual activity at a specific time or a specific computer had unnecessary logon. The user's first login can also be identified. Maybe there is a remote action going on and the lockout is happening remotely. So multiple cases are pre-built into the product. I have right here myself, username J. The users, there's an unusual logon failure. 10 plus logon failures activity occurred between this time. So this is 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. This is not my usual working hours. But then there were 10 logon failures, which is not my average. My usual logon failure is almost as good as zero. I don't make mistakes when I'm typing my password, but then there seems to be someone who's trying to initiate an attack. Such insightful information can completely alter how you handle account lockout. So we are trying to make it as proactive and dynamic as possible. So it helps even better if you understand all possible sources, which is exactly what I'm going to pop on your screen right now. So here you go. So the screen right here tells you all those sources. Just a quick second. So we are talking about multiple sources for logon failures. So we would want to know from where all does an user account get access, or from where all an account is being used. So this helps. Just a quick second as the screen loads. I would also want you to see a couple of other interesting user behavior analytics module. So you have unusual logon activity time or lockout activity time. So how frequently does this lockout happen? You can draw insights. So the system has a machine learning algorithm that draws a baseline for every user. If there is deviation from the baseline, that's exactly when the system kicks in to tell you what had gone wrong. So here you'd be able to find out unusual lockout activity. So that is one useful tip for you. Likewise, you could configure multiple other alerts for account lockout. So I'm going to quickly get back to the system and show you what more can happen if you had a proactive approach to account lockouts. Let me quickly check if I can pull up an interesting tool that complements the problem at hand. All right, helps you solve it right when it could probably begin. I'm going to log into another tool for password management. This one is a proactive approach to account lockout. What if your users never need to forget their passwords? What if they get to change their passwords every now and then and you notify them right when it's time? So we are talking about a proactive approach where we get the users notified right when their passwords are about to expire. The biggest challenge with Microsoft way of reminding users is it's not effective. There's a pop-up, and what do users do when they see a pop-up? They close the pop-up. They never really read the pop-up. So we would want a tool that can essentially notify them upon their impending password resets, and you can configure it in such a manner that you can repetitively notify them over course of time. Unless you remind them at least 3 or 4 times, we've seen it, it doesn't work. So you can remind them on their cell phone, you can remind them over a push notification, you can be very specific on the number of days before which you'd want this to execute. You can add multiple levels to it. 7 days before, you could do it daily, you could do it weekly or on specific days. 7 days, 3 days, 1 day ago, and this turns out to be a very beautiful way of reducing your account lockouts. Users don't forget their passwords, there are no stale passwords, so they don't get locked out. And in fact, a self-service module essentially turns out to be the best possible solution for account lockouts. What if the user does not pick their phone and call you every time when they think they need a resolution? Not when they need a resolution, but actually when they think they need a resolution. So you could also get that aspect of it covered. So we would want to proactively handle this, where we have soon to expire password expiry notification going out. So that is one way of handling it. What would be even cooler is to completely be okay with passwords being compromised. What am I talking about right here? Why would you want your passwords to be compromised? Nobody wants that. But what if I tell you it's okay even if your passwords are compromised? So that's where we've brought in a two-factor authentication right at the login, because we've seen instances, irrespective of how good you configure your AD password policies, it could be configured to its best possible extent. You would be using the fine-grained password policies, or you would be using GPOs to get granular, but still, I'm pretty sure there are users in your organization who still have a password like password at 123. So how do you enforce strength right there? How do we tackle the problem at source? So you would be able to use the password policy enforcer and strengthen the existing password policies by not allowing them to use dictionary words. So this completely changes the way how your users set passwords. I can choose a file. This is exactly what a user does, or an attacker does. They choose a dictionary file that is readily available online with all common passwords. They use a tool like Hydra to initiate an attack, and they also end up being successful getting access to one of those users who had their passwords set as password at 123 or organization at 123. So this definitely helps in enhancing your password strength, thereby stopping anybody from being able to hack into your system. Still, if you get hacked, do you need to worry? Can I have another mechanism that foolproofs me? Yes, you could very much do that. You could enable Windows two-factor authentication. What if you could ensure that right when the user is logging in, they cannot go through without a second factor? It could be duo security, it could be an email verification, it could be a radius server, or anything of that sort along those lines, where a user can pass through only when they do the second factor of authentication. Let me quickly see if I can show you how it works in real time. I have a case where an administrator account is compromised, but then the hacker is not able to proceed forward because there was an email one factor or two factor set as authentication. Let me quickly see if I can pull that up. So the case is an administrator account gets compromised. All right, the passwords are compromised. How does an attacker not go forward? How do you have a system that essentially blocks the attacker from going any forward? Let me quickly show you. All right. Do I have the case? Yes, here you go. So this is an administrator account. The password is compromised right now. Okay, the attacker tries to log in thinking that, wow, I've got the administrator account and I'm going to cause a lot of damage. But then wait, it doesn't go any further. It asks the user for a second factor of authentication. Here it's just email verification. You could customize it to a verification like a one-time password, or a touch notification, or a touch ID, or a face recognition. You could have any of those factors of second factor of authentication right there to stop an attacker from going forward. So I got a notification on my email, I have the code, I enter it, and that's only when do I get access to any of my Active Directory accounts or an administrator account or to any of my terminals. So how do we do this? How do we handle security? We would want to handle security proactively, and that's exactly what I showed you here. So we are talking about Windows two-factor authentication done right, and we've been discussing as to how account lockouts can be diagnosed with AD Audit Plus. I showed you a quick glimpse of handling the problem at the root, which is expiry of passwords and how do you notify them effectively. I also gave you a quick overview on how a two-factor authentication module can stop an attacker even if they had access to your passwords. So we'd be able to do quite a lot more. Cases are possible. I would want to know what exactly are your requirements, and have you faced any different scenario with respect to account lockouts, and do you think the best practices that we gave today in terms of identifying those lockout scenarios, in terms of knowing what could be potential reasons for lockout and how using AD Audit Plus can solve, do you think it was helpful? You please write to me. We would be really happy to understand what worked best for you. So we are here to take your questions. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful and patient audience. We've been covering quite a lot of ground around account lockout analysis. We've seen how user behavior analytics can help you essentially solve problems, and yes, we've learned the proactive approach to account lockout analysis issues. Thank you so much. You've been such a wonderful audience. I'm available to take your questions right now. If you want a copy of the presentation deck or the ebook that we've written around account lockout analysis, just drop me an email at jay@manageengine.com or drop me a message right now on chat, and I'd love to share all of that with you. Thank you guys. You've been such a wonderful audience. You have a good day.